Morning, Ways and Means. It is Friday, April 25th at 9 a.m. We are disrupting our usual Friday morning patterns of hearing bill intros. We'll do that again next Friday. In order to have a committee conversation about H483 with Pat Titterton. And then after the floor, please come back promptly. I did not realize how long the floor was likely to go today. And so we have a little packed pre-lunch agenda to get our heads around existing TIF before we talk next week about new TIFs. And then at 11:45, we're going to do ideally a very quick amendment to H86 and a vote. Which is the SALT bill.
This would be an OD amendment.
I think it's a committee amendment.
OD.
Okay. With that, Pat, you want to?
Carol.
Austin did get your last.
Great.
He was very.
That was one of my highlights. I don't know if you heard about that, Pat. I'll tell you about it later. Okay, good. So in committee conversations earlier in the week, Friday's really, everything starts to blur together with the days and the weeks. We had a lot of conversations about, we have sort of a certain amount of money that's allocated in the budget towards tax credits. And I think we all agree that we want to do everything we can to make sure our tax system is working for Vermonters, and tax credits are one way to do that. We talked a lot about veterans versus military retirees, not versus, but like the difference between those two things. Concerns about sort of, usually we have, one of my concerns around the military retiree exemption is that the rest of our tax law is income adjusted, and it seems weird to not have an income adjustment in this. We heard from folks with other pensions that they would also like tax benefits. So I asked Pat to essentially just like roll through and not like, 10 different scenarios of different ways we could think about this and talk about this. And so because these were just sort of like off the cuff scenarios, we don't have like full fiscal notes. We just have some of Pat's thinking and scribbles. So turn it over to you.
Yeah. So Pat Turgeon, Joint Fiscal Office. It's really great to know where I stand with the committee compared to road salt. But yeah, so I mean, I think maybe to start, I'll just sort of give like a little context about the money that we're talking about here. So within the House version of the budget, there was sort of $13.5 million sort of budgeted for tax cuts, right? And so what that basically can accommodate is the GovRec proposals. What you have in front of you so far in 483 is the child tax credit, the EITC, and the Social Security income threshold bump out. So those three pieces put together is $9.6 million of that 13.5. And in going through some of these exercises, it kind of sort of seemed to me that military and the Social Security treatment were sort of connected. And so when we think about what the initial cost of those two were, Social Security bump out was 2.1 million and military retirement was 3.9. So sort of the appropriations likes this term, the box, working within for, some of these, I guess they were called scribblings, is like $6 million. So
I call them scribblings because I don't want to expect you to give us exact numbers on anything at this stage.
yeah, no, that's great. And there's, if you go on the website, there's no documents under my name, but I have obviously all my notes with me. So, and some of the thinking was just from some of the conversations I've heard you all talking about with, typically don't exempt just classifications of income, usually target certain populations through like income, like means testing. And also, I heard a lot of talk about, what the chair mentioned, retirees and veterans. And also I saw some of the conversations you had, was it just yesterday, where you had some of the other representatives from pensions?
Wednesday.
Is it Wednesday? It blends together.
I know.
So heard a lot of that. So do you want me to just run through them or?
Yeah, if that works for you.
Sure.
Okay.
Um,
And some of these are like sort of questions I asked Pat like a month ago, and some of them are questions that came up on Wednesday, so.
yeah. Um, so the first one, looked at was, sort of means testing military retirement in a similar way to, we saw it with the S51 with the unpaid caregiver credit. It's something that's in existing statute with the, child tax credit, which is basically just, setting the income thresholds equal to what's in existing statute for those, which would mean 100% exemption of the income up to 125,000 and then sort of phased out over the next 50,000. So by the time that you're earning over $175,000, you can't exempt the income anymore. And so if we just took those income thresholds and basically applied that to whether you could or could not exempt your military retirement income, what I got to was about 2.5 million. So compared to the total cost of 3.9 million for just blanket full exemption, not based on income, setting it based on those income thresholds, I got to a number that was about 2.5 million. Another thing that I looked at was how far out could we bump the Social Security income thresholds, not require people to choose whether they took military retirement or Social Security.
So someone could take both.
You could take both, exactly. And not capping it at the existing sort of 10,000. And so, and this would apply to the CSRS also. What I looked at was you could bump that out by $15,000. So for single people going from 50,000 to 65,000 for the full exemption. For married individuals going from 65 to 80,000.
Do you have a sense of how many more Vermonters would have their full Social Security exempted under that?
I don't have the number of Vermonters, but I have a little breakdown here of where those dollars come from. So so the total cost of that would be $6 million. About 4.9 of that tax savings would be for Social Security receivers. And then a little over 500,000 for both military retirees and CSRS recipients.
That last sentence again, sorry. And a little over,
I'm throwing a lot of numbers out there.
sorry, just take it again.
So total cost $6 million. The breakdown of that is 4.9 for Social Security. And then a little over 500,000 for CSRS and military retirement. So I can get maybe some numbers on like number of taxpayers.
Yeah, and then my other, or percentage of
Yeah.
percentage of Social Security taxpayers. I think my other question related to that is I feel like we've had a really wide range of testimony about who actually would be able to be eligible for the military pension in terms of like where in their lives they are. And so I'm curious how many people who are receiving military pensions are also receiving Social Security and would be, getting and not even, double, yes, but also if we expand the Social Security threshold, we'll be offering a tax benefit to those folks too, those same folks, which I think is a benefit. So I'm just, because some of the testimony we heard is like mostly people who are 40, and then a lot of the testimony we heard, it was mostly people who are like regular retirement age.
Yeah, so one thing I looked at, so the Department of Defense has this actuarial report on their retirement system, and in that they include the age of the people who are receiving, and the average age for someone receiving military retirement pay in Vermont, actually, this is a national figure, was 65 years old. So it's not the median, but the average is 65. And also either I have said this or maybe the tax department has told you this. But with the way the forms are right now, there's a worksheet that people work through to determine what retirement exemption they should take. Taxpayers don't submit that worksheet, they just fill in the line on the form, so it's all sort of commingled, which makes it difficult to get at your other question of how many people would benefit from being able to take both. And so this is like real, like back of the envelope, it would be sort of a bigger undertaking, but the existing military retirement exemption, which probably is going to be taken by mostly by people who aren't receiving Social Security yet because of that $10,000 cap. It's probably somewhere in the 250 to like $350,000 range. So not a huge expenditure overall. But you know, I don't know if maybe that gives a little color to sort of the question.
Are you still speaking in context of just bumping up the $15,000 for income eligibility, or are you talking about something else?
Right, so that last comment was about existing statute. So the existing, what's in statute right now, the cost of the military portion of it is probably like what could theoretically show up in the tax expenditure report is maybe in like the $250 to like $350 or $1,000 range. And I guess maybe to give a little more context, if we just completely removed the requirement to choose between Social Security and military retirement, that number would probably be about 800,000 if you just remove the requirement to choose. Anyway, that was a lot of different answers that maybe nibble at answering your question.
Yeah, before we go on, I know we don't have like a fiscal note for this, but could we get like an informal copy and pasted?
I can do like
Because, what these options are and how much they cost, because.
I can do like a summary table. Yeah.
I just, Pat's gonna throw out like so much stuff today, and I wanted to get a sense of like where folks felt better about things before more math happens.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So the existing law, that's based on AGI,
Yes. Yeah. So
not
that
just their military piece.
yeah. And that's true for all of the retirement income exemptions. The income threshold is based on AGI, which will include, your 401k distributions, your wages, your dividends, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So the age group we're trying to attract here is those pre-Social Security guys,
Pre-retirement.
pre-retirement. Not,
That's your policy prerogative, right?
right.
If the policy is to track that, does that make, is that you're asking?
Well, I think what's interesting is if that's the policy prerogative, then the choice doesn't actually isn't a problem for people because it's the folks under pre-Social Security that you're wanting to give that benefit to.
Not just.
Yeah,
But
but prioritizing them. Oh, yeah.
And also people with children. So I wonder if there could be a component in there of children, in a bigger portion if there are children coming with them.
They have child tax credit.
We do have the delightful
Yeah.
child tax credit.
Yeah.
Best one in the country.
Okay. All right, well,
Which we're expanding in the same bill.
yes.
And the earned income tax credit, which we're expanding in the bill, which for folks who come here and are still working, right? A second after post. What are other things?
Well, and quickly, your comment echoes something I've heard on the Senate side in that it's some people are viewing it as a like economic development or recruitment tool. And so one thing I looked at was if you were to fully exempt it, so the $3.9 million, the governor recommended proposal. So that's $3.9 million coming out of personal income taxes, which is for the general fund, right? If you were to assume that this will attract a lot of people and will get a return on investment, you would need to basically add, and this is based on sort of Vermont median household income, about 1,200 military retiree households. So I'm also factoring in like spousal income into that. So, and that's just to pay back sort of the personal income piece. Obviously, that's not the only taxes that people pay. There's property taxes, gas tax, sales and use. If we were also to think about those, and this is based on a ACCD report from a couple of years ago, that'd be more like you'd need to attract another 500 over the
Wow.
baseline.
That's a lot of people.
Well, in the context of there's about 3,600 military retirees receiving benefits. So it's, what's the quick math there? Like a 18% increase or something like that. And again, that's sort of back of the envelope math.
Bill, do you have anything else?
No,
Okay.
Well, I don't think that, I think you need even more because you talked about sales and use tax briefly, but that goes into our ed fund. So if you're really talking about replenishing the general fund, you take out everything that goes to the ed fund.
Yeah, so the general fund piece would be the 1,200 new people, and then if we were just to say it can come from any source, it'd be like 500.
We need plus 1,200 if we're really looking clean, general fund versus ed fund, and plus 500 if you say all.
Yeah. So veterans, actually before that, just pension income in general. So one thing I also looked at was, there's FERS, there's CSRS, there's the military retirement, and then there's those 3 Vermont employee pension systems, Beamers, which I know you heard about on Wednesday, Visters. And so if you were to just sort of target those sort of 6 retirement systems, bumping those out or applying those to the sort of expanded what's proposed in the GovRec Social Security income thresholds, that'd be another $3 million.
Another $3 million, then that would cost $3 million, or it would be another,
That would cost $3 million,
Okay.
and then you also have to add in the social piece to that,
which would be,
another like 2.1.
okay.
So,
And when I think about sort of the box that we're working with based on the budget, 6? Is that right?
oh, I'm sorry, it's not 2.1 because the 2.1 from the GovRec included the CSRS.
Okay.
So that's like another 1.5 million. So this is actually in the conversation where I got to looking at veterans. And so what we do have, I looked at a couple of different credit levels, but about 15% of veterans have an AGI of $25,000 or below.
What is that again? 25?
15%.
15%. So it's like it's like 5,200 veterans in Vermont have an AGI of 25,000 or below.
200 veterans in Vermont have AGI under 25.
15%, yeah, according to census data. And so to sort of close the gap to get up to $6 million, $350 credit for those individuals would be about 1.8 million. A $250 credit would be about 1.4 million. So the 1.4 is the $250 credit for those veterans would get you to the 6.
And that would be all veterans, like meaning that would be available for all veterans, not just military retirees.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
not that $25,000 cap.
And there's also a little wiggle room where if you put like a $5,000 like phase out range, so 25 to like 30,000, there's a phase out range. You'd hit that like $1.4 million mark. Yeah, but under 25 would be the full 250. And again, I will send a summary table, so this is a little more digestible, and I'm not just throwing numbers out there. looking at my notes.
And that would be like the most economically vulnerable veterans in the state.
That'd be pretty low income. And in fact, I wouldn't be shocked if a lot of those individuals don't, or not a lot, a chunk of those individuals don't file their taxes because they're not required to.
Refundable?
That would be for refundable, yeah.
Okay.
If it was non, then, it'd come down a little bit, but honestly, at that income range, I'm not expecting there to be a lot of tax liability for them to offset with a non-refundable credit. So, I mean, that was a lot of numbers. I think I've gone through all the notes I have. There's some other, there's like a lot of different combinations that you can do here. And, depending on which items you choose, instead of with the GovRec, it's a $5,000 increase to the income thresholds. You could do like a 10,000 or 7,500 increase to those thresholds and accommodate some of the other things I've thrown out here. So I guess in a way, it's kind of like a menu.
Yeah.
It's a tasting menu.
Thank you. Bill, I think you had something.
Yeah. This isn't going to attract people to uproot and move to Vermont for $250.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a question for you all to ask yourselves, not to give me an answer. For you all to ask yourselves of, with any of these proposals, is that sort of the one like turning point factor that makes the decision for someone either to move into or move out of. One example I've sort of put out there in some of the other conversations, like in the Senate, is if you remember with the remote worker relocation incentive, that whole thing.
Representative Kimball's favorite.
Must you remind us, Pamela?
Well, so there was a report that the legislature commissioned that came back, and they did a survey. It's like, and they surveyed people who had moved here under that program. And they asked questions like, what made you move here? Was it amenities, like strongly, not strongly, that whole usual survey span. And so they like amenities, recreation, outdoors, the relocation incentive we gave you. And then they took the survey results and just assigned the pure decision point to the relocation incentive, sort of ignoring all of the other factors that people attributed to their decision to move to Vermont. So again, it's a question to ask yourselves, how much this is sort of a singular, decision point for people. Because for the full exemption, I think the average tax savings per filer would be about $900.
And that average tax savings per filer, I think I was really surprised when you shared the number with me of if we cap the military pension at 150 AGI, the tax credit.
Child tax credit.
At the child tax credit
Yeah.
levels, how much less money we spend on that tax credit, which really, I was shocked because there aren't really all that many Vermonters who make over that, right? Like often when we put a cap around there, it like doesn't really save us anything, right? And so so that average even, I imagine, is like pulled upwards by those top filers.
There's going to be a huge discrepancy, if you remember, between those enlisted retirees and the officers. So the officers were like 42,000 average, or sorry, $35,000 average. And then the enlisted folks are down around like 18 average military retirement income on average.
From a policy perspective, though, Bill, I think the way I think of it is the military pension exemption, which I think would be included in any version of this, is for exactly what you describe. And then the veterans one, which might be smaller, is a way of sort of acknowledging the service of some of the folks in our state who are like the most economically disadvantaged. And so it's like two different policy goals.
Right.
Yeah.
One more thing we'd have to consider
Yeah.
with the 25K AGI. Where's the benefits cliff?
Yeah.
If we give them too much more, they're gonna lose
Mhm.
support
Oh, yeah.
because I'm sure they know what's available.
Two other just real quick sort of income comments about what you were talking about. So with the enlisted versus officer folks, there's a big gap in their average amount. Enlisted make up about 75,000, or sorry, 75% of retirees in Vermont, and then the officers are about 25%. And the other thing that I looked at was, so we can't pull just military retirement income, the data that we have. But as sort of a proxy, I looked at pension income in general, which we can look at. And I'll just say above 175,000, which would be sort of the cap of where you don't get any of the exemption under that specific idea. About 17% of filers are above that, who receive that income. About 17% of them are above 175,000 in AGI, but they receive about 39% of pension income. So I think that sort of maybe illustrates why capping it, even that income threshold that captures 89% of tax filers in Vermont brings you down from 3.9 million to 2.5 million.
So those that earn above the 175, are they exempt up to the 175?
If they have AGI above 175, they can't exempt, under this specific idea, they wouldn't be able to exempt any of that income. It's kind of like with the Social Security thresholds, where if you are single and you earn below 50,000, you can exempt all of it. There's a $10,000 phase out range. So once you're earning above $60,000, you can't exempt any of that Social Security income. So it's kind of a similar analogous sort of setup.
Maybe 100% under 125 and then phase out up to 175.
Exactly.
Same way as the child tax credit.
That's right.
Let's all keep on thinking about this. Pat will send us some notes and we'll see each other after the floor.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay.